there is a really easy and streamlined way for us to add our 3D footage inside our camera footage, maintaining the light and the colors of our footage that serve as a bounce or reflection for our 3D models inside Blender. So basically, we are going to be mainly using free add-ons. Sometimes I use some paid ones, but that's just to make my life a bit easier and faster, but you don't have to. So without further ado, let's just go jump into the computer. Of course, everyone has their own way of working and the steps that you want to take in order to create your 3D composite. In my case, because I like to take a bunch of random footage while I'm traveling or going to a specific place and not think too much about what I'm going to do after, I like to always start my projects by looking at my footage, analyzing what I have, what I took from a certain day for a certain trip. And for example, these videos from Georgia that I took back in 2022, I actually had them in the back of my mind that I didn't use them as much as I would like to. So I decided to just bring them up here on the Vinch and start looking around, choosing a few of them that I think are interesting to reuse, to do some type of color grading. And then I end up deciding that I really enjoy this footage here that you are seeing. Okay, with this camera going forward. And I just did a color grading here on top. You see, I didn't use the grain in the end, but I just fixed the exposure, a little bit of the contrast, the hue. I added some golden hour color grading on top. And then finally, I added some glow. You see here how the footage is on the vector scope. And why I did the color first in this workflow, just because for my preferred way of working on Blender, I like to see the final image there. I get really frustrated when I'm creating my 3D scene and the footage is in log still, or I don't see how it is going to look in the end, if it's cinematic or not. So I do think that the main driver of the scene is going to be the footage itself. So why not to have the footage prepared before I push to Blender? Of course, I could just not use any of this and bring the footage. Let me just bypass everything and bring the footage like this. Well, not exactly like this, because here I'm using an ACES transform for DJI log, and it's not the best one. But yeah, basically you can bring your footage in Vlog on Blender, work in Vlog. You can even export in Vlog. That you can see one of the videos that I recorded before. But for me, lately into my workflow, I do prefer to start with a more finalized footage. Okay, so after that, of course, I just exported my video. I actually exported all of these videos here that I have in my sequence. Okay, all of them differently. I just use individual clips, and then in the file name, you just add this percentage. For example, I put clip name. And then I put the motif or the color grading style that I'm looking for. And then in this example, I just use golden hour. And then I export it, and they all have different names. And I exported all the clips separately so I can use them as I want. Also, one of the things that does help a lot on Blender is that by not bringing a log footage and bringing a footage that you already added some sharpening, some contrast, is that it becomes way easier to do the 3D tracking. So let's bring here our Blender scene. I'm going to explain everything so you don't get overwhelmed. But to start, what I did is basically I came here, VFX, motion tracking. I added my footage. Let's bring it here. Here I have it in EXR, and I also have a regular MOV. You can choose which one you prefer. I tend to enjoy bringing in EXR. I think it works a bit better, but it's not a necessity. Let's just use then the MOV file here. So first things first is that I want to match the camera that I used and the lens in the day. And this is really, really important, because if you give this already, the motion tracking of your scene is going to be way, way easier. I usually have a lot of problems doing the motion tracking. I try a bunch of different techniques. I also like to use quite a lot the new Geo Tracker that tends to work quite well. But in this case, because I'm bringing a footage that is already pre-processed, you see the sharpening is on point, a lot of contrasts. It's not really difficult to do that here. So the sensor here, in this case, was something like 33.50, something around that. I would have to look it again, but because I use the DJI S2 or 2S, and then the lens is at 22 millimeters. Actually, let me find out the sensor width. Okay, it's 13.05. 13.05. Okay, and the focal length then 22 millimeters. Then here the tracking settings, I'm just going to use this planar. Sounds okay. Set scene frames, prefetch, and now it's loading in the cache. And actually I don't want 290, I'm just going to put 74, I believe. Actually, let's see, 24 times 4, 96, 473, 72. Okay, then I'm going to click detect fixtures here in the beginning of the clip. Then come around here, detect fixtures again, and then track back. Here, track to the end. Okay, so I believe to have my two keyframe points here around 63 and 12. I don't need any of this. Let's just click solve camera motion 1.93. Let's do a quick cleanup. So clean up tracks. Let's put error of 4. Delete. Then now error of 3. Then solve camera motion 0.96. So that is a really good tracking. We wouldn't have to do anything else. In this case, I'm not going to set up the scene or all the rest because I already did that. So we can just come back to our layout. But if you had to do it now, just go here, set up as background, set up tracking scene. So what I did here on the layout, a few things that I need. Basically, I need to have some geometry to project my footage. So in this case, let's just bring the camera and let's just bring here the image opacity. So here's what the camera is seeing, and then we see also our tracking, how it's looking, and you see that basically it stays where we want. So we just need to add some geometry where we can project our footage. For this, the first thing that you want to do is normalize the scene. How do you do that? I'm gonna hide all of the extra things that I have here. Okay, so you don't get bogged down by that. And then here opacity comes to 0.5. So I'm gonna add a cube. Then the cube is more or less the size of a human, 2 meters tall. And you see here, if I put near this guy, it's more or less there, right? So it's already normalized. But what happens when it's not normalized? Let's do that here. I will unnormalize the scene. So the cube from the motion tracking, you'll come something like this, okay? So really big cube, and you have here the camera. To normalize, basically, you add a cube, and I also like to change here from 2 meters to 0.5, this to 0.5, so it does look more like a human. Put here on top of the 3D cursor, and then I'll select everything, deselect the cube, and select again the empty. Oops, I did something wrong. So select everything, then basically deselect the cube. Did a mistake again. So let's try again. Deselect the cube, holding control. Why it's not working? Wait 1 second. So if I hold control, it just selects the cube. If I hold shift, it deselect the cube. So that's what we want. And now I want to select this, the last, so I hold shift and select again. Perfect. Then I'll click Ctrl P and select parent to object. Okay. So now this is controlling all of our scaling. So we can just select the empty and we scale up or down, and you see that it will change overall the scene. And let me just also change here to 3D cursor. and then it's going to basically maintain where we put our origin in the motion tracking and not move too much the scaling or the scene here. And it's basically going to maintain the cube in the origin place, and then you can just zoom in and do the scaling here, and then eventually just bring it down. Okay, so actually let me come back from everything, because doing that, of course, after you have all the scene ready, is going to mess up your project. I hope I still have enough undos, and I do have, so that's great. So I can remove my cube here. So back to our scene. Then after you normalize all the scaling, we need to basically create all of this geometry where we are going to project our footage. And for this, I tried to do in a few different ways. I tried first to use reality capture, add this footage there, and see if I would get some sort of model. I didn't. I got something really, really bad. So I just decided to just basically sculpt this and also use this proportional editing. So I added one plane here, scaled quite a lot, 90, and then subdivide a bunch of times. I'll do it just as an example. So I'll place more or less here, then select the edge, push it up, like this, push it like this. Then I select all, and then I subdivide by, let's say, 50, should be okay. Subdivide by 50, and then I'll come now to vertex mode, select one of the points that I want to work on, proportional add, G, then up here, and then I can start moving and playing with the mouse wheel here to push more or less. And how do I know where to push? Basically, I'll just come more or less to this view, and I will do something like this. Here's still there, so bounding box center, yes. So, push it like this, and then you more or less kind of do a basic, the basic form. It doesn't need to be really that correct or that great. You see here, kind of looks bad, but we just need to project the footage. The most important part is where the shadows of your 3D models are going to appear, because, for example, if the shadow is on a flat plane, the shadow is going to be flat. So I added this kind of hue curve here, just so the shadows also follow that. And after you have your 3D model, basically, I'm going to remove this scene here so we don't get bogged down by that. And I also remove this two background. So we have something like this. So our 3D scene, then you add your 3D models, you add also your lighting. In this case, I'm using the Pure Sky add-on to create more or less lighting that I want. I'm going to show you. So this is the light that I have from Pure Sky add-on. So quite similar to what I had in the day, the sun more or less in the same place. You just have to figure out based on your source footage, of course. But then I don't want to use that. I want to use the actual footage in the background. So here you can just come and choose transparent. That is fine. And you see here that the shadows are in the planes, but the footage is not being pushed to the planes yet. How do we do that? For that, you're going to use the link below to download this new add-on that is free, and it was created by Ian Hubert. So huge shout out to Ian Hubert for developing this. And basically what we need to do after we install this add-on is that we will come here to the scene, and we have this compify footage. First, here we add our footage. It can be EXR or MOV. I do believe that it makes things easier for us when it's in MOV format, so just use that. And here the source image sequence, of course. Oh, actually movie. Color space, in this case, because I exported from DaVinci Resolve the full color graded image, I'll just use sRGB. Then the camera from our motion tracking. Then we will receive something like this, and then we click plus, and it's going to create the footage geo group. I'm gonna Control Z here. And then from this footage geo, you put the geo that you want to project your footage. So in this case, this mountain, which is just these simple planes here. And then it's also going to create one called Footage Lights. And here I added my Pure Sky Pro add-on, which has the sun, but also it is going to take into account if we have an HDRI, it's going to take that into account also. In my case, the HDRI is the Pure Sky add-on. So it's not only to use in the Pure Sky add-on sky, but it's also in use the sun of Pure Sky add-on. But in your case, it can be the Nishita Sky or the regular HDRI. So after you have all of this ready, we are going to click Prep Scene, and it's going to prep everything, and then Bake Footage Lighting. We crashed our Blender. Okay, so our Blender crashed for some reason, so let's do it again. Come here, same thing that we had before. I'm going to come here, click Bake Footage Lighting, and it's going to bake for us. Now it worked. And I'm just gonna come here, and I'm going to look through the report cheating. Wait, something went wrong. Let's add here again the MOV file from the camera. Okay, perfect. Now we have the MOV here, we baked our footage, we prep our scene, and it's being projected right here into this geometry in the colors of the video that we added from DaVinci Resolve. And then, for example, these planes here in the background, they are not using this technique. So if we put anything in front of them, the shadow are not going to be projected because this is basically an emissive material. And then the shadows are not pushed towards that. You see here, it maintains the color from DaVinci Resolve, but it doesn't allows us to have a shadow there. While this one, with this technique, you see the shadow does comes out to the colors, and the colors maintain everything. And the good thing is that the footage is also bouncing a little bit of the light in our model. So we also have the model in the correct spacing, meaning that we can add, for example, some fog, and it's going to create the space. For this example, I added 2 planes with just the projected footage, which is basically the video on an emission plane using the camera project node that comes with this add-on that you downloaded. You just have to change here the aspect ratio to the aspect ratio of your footage. So for example, 1920 by 1080, you divide and you get your proper aspect ratio. In this case, my footage was a bit different than that, so it's 1.778. But you see here, everything is projected correctly. I added this one here and this one on the background because I planned first to have some kind of fog. So I wanted to have fog in this area a bit less present than in this one on the background. Then for this, you can just play around with the distance. Okay, basically the footage is going to remain the same because it's been projected by the camera. So you see here, you can go up and down. Of course, here is disappearing just because of how far the camera can see. So let me put it. Then you can push up and down. You see here. Still the same thing, and that's basically it. So it's quite simple. You bring your footage, you do the motion tracking, you then bake the lighting on top of your footage, you bring your 3D models here, and then you can just export the final thing, either if it's EXR with all the separate layers or just a PNG from the composite window, which is what I did for our final video because I didn't want to work again on the color because I worked with the colors on DaVinci Resolve, and my 3D model basically gets pushed to the scene really, really well because of all this emission happening, all the colors, the matching of the colors. And then I just pushed the PNG to After Effects, did a final color grading, super, super simple, just to create some atmosphere and make it a bit more cinematic. And we got our final result. So it's a really nice and simple technique that I'm going to be using over and over, and it helps a lot to combining our 3D with our video footage. So if you do enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like, subscribe. Also, again, huge shout out to Ian Hubert for developing and giving this plugin for free. and I hope to see you on the next one.